Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday. This is Conscious Conversations, the second episode. I want to give everybody an opportunity to join us and be able to put in some comments in our section. Just a few things in terms of housekeeping. Wanting to look ahead and think about those comments. So, first of all, thank you so much for those of you that have sent us comments and making sure that we have feedback from you, some of the other things. So go ahead and say hello. Always love to get the comments from you here on our page. So looking at some of the things that are going on in our area is making sure that we are able to hear from you. This last week we had a lot of really great conversation, and I want to thank you for that. One of the things that have kind of been pushing to the top quite often in the conversations that we've been having has been a lot around motivation. I've had quite a few people send some comments over in talking about motivation, or more specifically, kind of having a lack of motivation. So that's one of the things that I want to make sure that I am answering. But we, of course, like I said, I want to hear from you. Good morning, Alicia. So glad that you can join us. From California. I am looking down to the iPad, so any questions or comments that you have, please go ahead and put them there. Would love to be able to have conversation with you. So talking about motivation, or the lack of motivation, is really understanding, quite a bit of people have sent, I don't know why, but I have no drive right now. Or, I feel like I'm in a rut. Is this ever going to go away? Or we've also heard and seen some other things in the sense of, I was so motivated last year, what's happened? And so one of the things that we need to do is we really need to get down to the core of understanding of what motivation is, how it is something that is a part of our world and the way that we respond to the world. And then we've got a few tips for you in the sense of things that you can do to get a solid grounding around what's going on and things that can happen. So, first of all, let's look at the word motivation, right? And understanding the root of that word motivation is talking about motive and action, right? Or rather, what is it that is causing you to want to take action? So we have to get right down to the root of that motivation, your motivation. What is the motive? What is the thing that is causing you to want to take action? And so that is one of the biggest things. Quite often when we have conversations with individuals, maybe there are some external motivators in the sense of, I want to prove others wrong, or I want to impress certain people, right? External validation. It could also be that maybe, you had a particular thing that was going on in your world that you needed to pay for. Whether that was a debt that was causing you a lot of stress, or maybe it was the purchase of a new home, or maybe it was paying for a wedding, something, there was some event that was necessary or causing you to want to look at some of those things and figure out, how do I get this thing done? Well, what ends up happening is when we have motivation that is external, right? Again, I want to prove others wrong. I want to get validation externally. I want to make sure that I get this thing, win this trophy, some kind of specific event or task or object that I want to pay for. But what happens when that's done? What happens when we've proved them wrong? What happens when we have gotten the validation? What happens when we purchase the house, or the wedding is over, or the vacation is paid for? So when our motivation, when that motive to take action is something that is outside of us, it is something that is either completed or accomplished, then we look up and we kind of are from that place of, I've climbed the summit, and I either turn around and go home, or I go and I find another summit to climb, right? That's one of the largest areas that we see quite often where motivation becomes lacking because a task has been completed or the validation has been completed in that response. Another thing to be very mindful of is quite often a lot to do with our upbringing. So, talking about where we are, especially when we're talking about motivation from a business perspective, from a sales perspective, from who we're having conversations with, quite often that can also be a conversation around scarcity or abundance. And what I mean by this is, if your upbringing was one that money was always scarce, we were always having conversations about living paycheck to paycheck, or we were always being told no, or not right now, or we don't have that, right? Many of those old adages that we hear of, money is the root of all evil, or money doesn't grow on trees, or some of those things that we're used to that were kind of colloquialisms and things that we had heard throughout society and history when talking about money or the lack of money. And so, what oftentimes happens, if you were someone who had grown up from a survival place, a scarcity place when it comes to money, then it always feels like you're running for your life or you're surviving for your life. So, what happens when we get a little bit of money in the bank? What happens when we no longer have that pressure of survival mode? Well, often what ends up happening is that individual gets a couple money, they get money in the bank, they feel a little bit comfortable, they have an itty bitty little cushion, and they go, man, I deserve to take a break. I've been running for a very long time trying to survive, not to be eaten, right? And so then they rest. And again, that motivation is gone because the survival aspect is no longer there. And so now we have an individual who is resting, relaxing, right? This is the treat yourself mentality, right? This is the I'm going to take a break because, oh man. But then what ends up happening, it's sometimes through self-sabotage, sometimes just through that training, is then we wait until that cushion gets depleted. And all of a sudden, that survival trigger has to kick back on. And we go through this vicious cycle of going from I need to run for my safety to I have a cushion so I can rest. Then I put myself back into a situation of survival, rest, survival, rest. And as much and as often as individuals will speak and say that they really want to make sure that they never go back through the cycle of constantly living paycheck to paycheck or dealing with chaos, right? That tension resolution, it actually has been a part of their programming and their relationship with money to be deeply rooted in you're either surviving or you're resting, never really getting to that next phase of thriving. And that's where sometimes we would refer to that as self-sabotage. So looking at yourself and looking at your motivation, this is where we want to take a little bit of inventory for ourselves of what has been my motivation. If I'm feeling like I don't know what's going on or I've lost my motivation, we need to go back to understanding what is that reason, right? This is where books like Simon Sinek's Start With Why is saying if all you're doing is focusing on the do and you never really focus on the why aspect of why you're doing things, oftentimes you can be misguided, you can get lost, right? This is where I will say that when you are having other external factors that are there, whether it's that survival mode or it's proving others wrong or it's getting validation externally, all of those paths might take you quite a ways. And then you're going to get somewhere and you're going to look around and you're kind of stuck at a dead end or a cul-de-sac going, all right, I've gotten this far, but now what? And so going back to and understanding what our motivation is one of the biggest elements that we can be very, very mindful of. So if you are the type of person who's saying, I no longer want to be focused on that financial survival, but I would really like to make sure that I'm coming from a place of abundance, or I'm rewiring myself in my relationship with money or work or the attachment to those two things, it's very, very important that we go down to the root and understand why that is. So this is one of the things that can happen is we have to make sure that we are scheduling time to revisit our goals, to revisit our vision, to make sure that we have some of those visual cues around us to ensure that we are being grounded in that motivation, right? That motive to take action. Because if we aren't clear on the motive, we're not going to take the action. And that's what often we're feeling when I don't understand why I just really have no drive. I don't understand why, I'm in autopilot, or I'm just kind of standing idle, and things aren't horrible, but they're not great. And I don't understand why I'm having this feeling. It's because we've gotten too far away from linking our activities to its purpose. And so we're either just not going to take activities, or we're going to do the bare minimum on what it takes to be self-sufficient. The challenge with this, especially when we're talking about procrastination, or talking about a lack of motivation from a financial or from a business perspective, is that this can oftentimes affect your well-being. It can affect your financial security. It can affect the level of anxiety and stress that you have, or that is being self-inflicted because of this challenge. And that's why it is so important that when we talk about revisiting what are some of those things that are there, what have you done, that it's not just about the food, the shelter, and the water, but making sure that we understand what is it on a deeper level that we're focused on when it comes to that motivation. So one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we were able to cover is understanding some of those different things that are there on what can you do in the instance that you feel like you don't necessarily have that motivation, or you've lost it, right? How does Stella get a groove back? So number one is you have to give yourself grace, right? Giving yourself grace and understanding that as humans, we aren't machines, right? And as much as we'd like to believe that we're not a part of nature, we are nature, right? There is a spontaneity, there is a instantaneous, there is an organic pattern in nature, right? We've seen the x-rays of the lungs, right, in which they look very much like the roots of trees. We've seen the connections of neurons that look a lot like mycelium, and the connection of mycelium. There's a lot of things that we can see in nature and in our body that mirror one another. Another element of that is the understanding of the natural ebb and flow, right? We know that tide goes up and tide goes down. We know that there are seasons of growth and there are seasons of rest. We know that there are times to be ahead and there are times to be behind. So realizing that it is very well possible that your body is also, or your mind is also, just needing a time of rest. And so giving yourself grace and realizing that if you are now having a conversation with yourself that is talking about your own awareness of no longer being around, or no longer being mindful of that motivation, right? Once my body kind of picks up, or my brain picks up on the fact that, man, I'm either in a rut or I don't have my motivation, that is an awareness that is you wanting to kick back into doing those activities and getting into the root of your motivation. You're rested, your brain is rested, your body is rested, and now you're ready to start the cycle again. So part of that is checking in with yourself, checking in with your body, checking in with your mind, and going, what is the next right thing that I can do right now, right? That's number one. Number two is to make sure that you are filling your cup first, right? You cannot pour into others unless you pour into yourself. And almost every business that you do, it is always beholden to customers, right? Whether you're business to business or you're business to consumer, there is always the idea that someone outside of you is the customer. They're the person who's going to be paying. That is who we're beholden to, in that sense of, I have to pour into others in order for me to get what I want, right? Zig Ziglar used to say that you can get whatever you want if you help enough other people get what they want, and that's exactly what the sentiment is. But in order for me to pour into others, I have to pour into myself. So this is where I need to do a little bit of an audit on what are the activities, what am I putting into my body, what am I eating, what am I drinking, what news or television am I watching, am I reading books, am I listening to podcasts, am I listening to information that is putting me in a positive mood, or things that are putting me in a negative mood, right? I know that there's a lot of things going on in the world. There's a lot of things that are getting people very passionate. And we can do what we can do and only what we can do, right? And so having an awareness of what are the things that I have control, what are things that I have influence, what is the thing that I can contribute to if I am passionate or I feel like it is my calling to be able to help in some way on things social, but at the same time not allowing myself to be affected by the things that I do not have control over, right? So having an awareness of some of those things, it's also the same thing in terms of how are the relationships that are around me? Am I getting enough sleep? Am I exercising? Right? To that sense of we are a part of nature. This body is the machine, the engine that we are using, right? So if I am a sports car and I'm putting in horrible, low-grade gasoline that has a ton of dirt and grime in it, how well am I going to perform over a long period of time? Well, it's the same thing in the sense of what are we pouring into our body? And am I making it a priority? Does my calendar reflect those priorities? Am I being intentional about those choices and making sure that they're a part of my world? So really understanding, and it's so fascinating, I'll have conversations with people, and especially coaching clients, where you'd think that we would be talking about metrics or we'd be talking about their pipeline. And quite often we're talking about their morning routine, or we're talking about their diet, or we're talking about how much sleep are they getting. Because if you think that those components do not have a ripple effect on how you're showing up and how attentive you are and how focused you are and the discipline that you have, all of those things are interrelated. So really making sure that we're giving ourselves grace of wherever we are, and that we're also filling our cup first, right? Pouring into ourselves before we pour into others. That then follows by making sure that understanding that we must take action. So just as motivation, as we said, what is the root cause? What is that motive that's causing me to take action? But it's also an understanding that motivation itself requires action, right? There is an inertia component to this. So understanding that taking any steps, even the smallest steps, can quite often kickstart what we need to move in the right direction. So even asking myself, what is one thing that I can do today that's going to move me in the right direction? Well, by accomplishing that one thing, I then have a positive reinforcement of feeling good about myself that I accomplished that thing, which is then going to encourage me to take more action. By taking more action, that's going to cause a more positive response. That positive response is then going to start a regenerative cycle that I now have that inertia in my favor, that I am able to move in this way. Right? We've heard about Quantum Leap. That's a wonderful course that has been taught by Gary Keller for many, many years. And, quantum is a big word that means very, very small. And it is exactly in the sentiment of understanding what are the activities that I can do, even the smallest activities that when done over a large period of time equals something extraordinary. Keith Cunningham, the rich dad of Rich Dad and Poor Dad, wrote a book called The Road Less Stupid, and other books. But in it, one of the things that he talks about is that extraordinary results are not accomplished by massive things. Extraordinary results are accomplished by doing ordinary actions over and over and over again, right? And so that is where we go back and go, if I am having a lack of motivation, that I can do one small thing, and that one small thing can lead to the next thing and the next thing, right? So we are giving ourselves grace. We're pouring into our cup first, because there's no way that I can pour into others if I don't pour into myself. I have to understand that motivation takes action. I can't just goal it away. I can't just believe that I am going to watch a documentary, or I'm going to listen to a podcast, or I'm going to have someone else take action and that's going to get me motivated. It's not. You might have heard this before. No one can motivate you, but people can inspire you. Things can cause inspiration. It can put the breath in it, right? Spirit is the one that breathes, right? So inspiration is the thing that gives us kind of a boost of air, a boost of energy. So looking at what am I doing to make sure that I am getting inspired? What am I listening to? What am I watching? Who are the people that I'm surrounding myself with? Again, that kind of goes back into that I have to pour into myself, is getting a really firm understanding of what my inspiration is, the things that are around me, keeping me in a positive mindset, keeping me wanting to go back to that motivation, right? So giving myself grace, I am pouring into my own cup. I am understanding that motivation itself requires action. I have to have a cadence of accountability. Now, this is where people will go, oh, this is just a sales pitch for coaching. It can be an accountability partner, although oftentimes accountability partners give themselves excuses the same way that we give excuses. This is one of the things that when we are a reasoning creature, which as a human being we are, we're very good at coming up with the best excuses as to why something didn't get done. We are amazing at justifying why we had to reshuffle our priorities. And so quite often, if you've got an accountability partner who's also not showing up at a high level, well, they're going to make excuses for themselves. They're also going to make excuses for you, so that we just have this wonderful kind of relationship back and forth where we're patting each other on the back for not really doing the things that we said that we wanted to do. So this is an understanding that although we believe that self-accountability is real, self-accountability is a mirage. It looks like it's there. I mean, I can see it, but when I go to reach at it, I see that it's absolutely not. And so making sure that you have a coach, or that you have someone who is outside of this situation, or someone outside of the activities, that is able to not necessarily be an opinion. They're not necessarily there to be a place for judgment. This is where so often people will go, oh, I know exactly what you're going to say, or Michael, I give you permission to beat up on me. It's not my opinion, it's not my judgment, right? As a coach, the role of a coach is to hold a mirror up to you so that you can look at the reflection on what is being reflected back to you. And then in real time, you can either go, all right, that's validating the behavior or the response or the programming that I want, or it's causing me to reconstruct what is my plan so that I can go back and do something else, right? And that's all that it is. You said that you wanted to do this. This is what your actions were. Are you happy with the results? Yes, keep doing what you're doing. No, let's have a conversation about what else has to happen. This kind of micro adjustment, this constant feedback loop of reflecting, making changes, going back, reflecting, making changes, is something that, again, if we've lost motivation, we've probably gone a long period of time where we've not been reflecting, making those micro adjustments, and moving into something else. So looking at yourself, and now I just want to pause for a moment because we are on 4 of the 5. I'm going to get to the 5th one. Some of you might be like, well, Michael, I'm great. I appreciate this, and this is wonderful. It's 8:30, it's 8:52, whatever it is. And I love this conversation, but it doesn't apply to me. I've got plenty of motivation. I'm ready to go. Well, this is also an understanding that number 5, which is we have to budget for burnout. And so you might not necessarily have a lack of motivation right now, but it is something that this isn't a conversation of who is affected by a lack of motivation. It is when. And then, quite frankly, when we have a lack of motivation, the real test is how long do we allow it to sit there? Do we fall off the horse for a very long period of time, where this is weeks or months of feeling this way, of this lack of motivation? Or are we building ourselves in this place of making sure that when it does happen, we can identify it, we can start to put solutions around it, and then get back on, right? And that's one of those things, if we think about medicine, right? The best treatment for any kind of illness is prevention. It's the same thing when we're talking about a lack of motivation, right? And I know that there's a paradox to this, because some of you are going to be like, well, Michael, you just said that we're not machines, that we're part of nature, and that there's a natural ebb and flow. So why would I want to be motivated all the time? I'm not on all the time. I agree with you 100%. But if you are feeling an internal conflict of, I want to be motivated, yet I'm not, then these are where we're able to tap in and look at some of the things that can be helpful for us, right? So I'm giving myself grace. I'm pouring into myself before I pour into others. I am looking at and understanding that motivation requires action, even of the smallest tasks. I am then holding myself accountable through a cadence of accountability with some external form of accountability. That could be a spreadsheet, right? That could be MyFitnessPal, some kind of tracker on your phone if it's health related. It could be little circle things on your Apple Watch. It could be a coach if it's something a little bit more in depth than maybe tracking your steps. Maybe it's, what am I doing for lead generation? What am I doing to hold my people accountable? How am I growing as a leader? Some of those things, if you've set goals or metrics around them, outcomes that you want to see happen, what are some of those things? And then number 5, as I kind of alluded to, is to make sure that you are budgeting for burnout. So a reminder that burnout is just that we've gone too far with not linking our activities to that greater purpose. And so making sure that I am scheduling time to revisit my goals, making sure I'm scheduling time to do the activities that I said I wanted to do, right? It is very close to the first half of the year being over. Many of you probably set some goals back in December or January, saying certain things like you wanted to take more vacations this year, or you wanted to spend more time with your children this year, or you wanted to put a certain amount of money away this year, or you wanted to lose 30 pounds this year, whatever those things are. And if you're looking at it and it's June and you've not scheduled any vacations and you've not spent any more time with your family, and there are language and things that are happening around you that then is now a justification for why you can't take a vacation. Oh, Michael, you can't expect me to take a vacation right now. This is the busiest time of the year. Or, things are slowing down. I need to really lean in because this is the time that I need to. I can't rest on my business right now. Whatever the excuse is, we are finding a justification for moving that priority. The thing that we said was important to us, the thing that we said was the reason why we're working, all of a sudden has moved away, and we're no longer really going back to whatever that motive is, right? So making sure that we're scheduling for vacations, making sure that we're revisiting our goals, making sure that we're casting a vision. Now, I know that for some people, the idea of casting a vision sounds too far-fetched. It sounds like fantasy, right? I was raised, you just do the work and you figure it out later. But casting the vision is just making sure that you are walking in the right direction, right? If we're due east, just making sure that we're walking east, right? Not necessarily saying that I want to go to any particular place or we're hitting B's 500 points between point A and point Z, but rather I have a vision on what it is that we're working for, what it is that we're building, because it's probably going to have an effect on some of those other things that I'm doing, right? So looking at these 5 things, whether you are currently feeling a little loss, a little lack of motivation, or this is something that in the future you want to just make sure that whenever these feelings start to kind of bubble up, that you can go and revisit those 5 things. We're going to make sure that this is available for you. It's going to be in our blog here pretty soon, once we can get it written and published, on what are those 5 things that you can do if you feel like you've lost motivation. I want to say thank you so much for those people who reached out and gave us these topics. As a reminder, the topics that are going to be every Tuesday are either going to be things that I create, or more importantly, if they're things that you bring, just like today's episode, these are going to be based on your questions, your comments. They're always going to be anonymous, so don't feel that I'm going to call you out unless you want to be called out. But we will always make sure that the questions that you have, the topics that you want to discuss, anything about mindset, anything about motivation, particular skills, action, wealth building, any of those topics, feel free to reach out to us. You can send them in an email to team@michaelreedy.org. You can send it to us privately in a Facebook message or Instagram DM, whatever you feel is most comfortable. We are able to use that for future topics, and of course want to make sure that we address those for you. And as always, I'm so thankful for you for joining me this morning. Any questions that you have, I would love to have a conversation with you. Again, we love starting our mornings this way. I think it's a wonderful way of framing your mindset. It's great for me, right? I'm really speaking to myself. You're just on the other side of the camera, or you're on the other side of the audio of this. But it really is a wonderful discussion to be able to frame your morning and to go in and get after it. So again, this is for you. This is something that if we're talking about things that you don't want us to be talking about, in the sense that you've got something more important, priority that you'd like for us to discuss, please bring it to us, and we'll absolutely make sure that that happens. It is just at the top of the hour, so I want to say thank you again. But before we do that, we've got a little bit of time. Let's talk about some AHAs. So as a reminder of what AHA stands for, right? It is agents helping agents. It's associates helping associates. It's a-holes helping a-holes. Whatever you want it to be, the point is that your confirmation, the things that are important to you, the things that you took out of this discussion, is a wonderful way of, A, number one, you're going to confirm it for yourself, and B, it might be something of help to someone else who may have joined us late, or someone who might have missed a certain aspect of that, right? Let's see. So we've got some good mornings. Absolutely. Let's see. Mark Bassarup said, "My worst enemy is past success." This is just what I needed to hear today. You're absolutely right, Mark. That is one of the things that when we talk about a fear of failure, we've also heard about a fear of success. And the fear of success is the fear of losing what we've gained, right? Again, coming from a deeply rooted place of scarcity, checking in, and that's that feeling of I couldn't possibly reproduce it, or I've built this thing that I can't maintain. And so, absolutely, that is one of the biggest things. I also have those things show up, right? That false evidence appearing real. So that is absolutely there. Let's see. Janine J9 said, "I like to hang out with people who are where I want to be for motivation." That is absolutely one of those things. Who am I surrounding myself with? We've had that discussion. If I'm one of five people, right, and we talk about your five closest people. But if I'm one of five people and I drink all the time and I eat horrible food and I don't exercise, and the other four people that I'm around do triathlons and they're very intentional about their macros and everything else, how long are we as a group going to be around each other before I am going to self-select out because I'm no longer around? It's the same thing what J9's talking about, is that if I'm around people that are having conversations about success, about positive mindset, about building authentic relationships, then by way of proximity, I too am going to be having those conversations. I'm going to be having those mindsets. I'm going to be looking at some of those things. Thank you very much for those feedbacks. Awesome. Okay, well, it is 9:01. I hope you have a wonderful morning, and I will see you next Tuesday. Before that, also, just real quick, really not scripted on this one, on Thursday, so it's the 28th right now, on Thursday the 30th, we are doing a 2-hour mid-year alignment workshop. Absolutely free. It's going to be virtual. We have packets of information for you to go through and kind of fill out to have a mindset prior to that workshop. But that's going to be a deep dive to make sure that we are getting realigned with the things that are most important to you. Making sure your priorities are set, making sure your mindset is set, making sure that you are set up for success for the second half of the year. We will make sure that that is posted in the comment section here. Most of you are probably already getting an email, as well as it is posted on our Facebook and our Instagram pages, where you can access that link and register. So I will either see you next Tuesday for our next conscious conversation, or I will see you this Thursday at noon Eastern time for our mid-year alignment workshop. Bye, everybody. I appreciate you very much.